Brian Davis and Deni Brian here from Spark Rental.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our weekly broadcast and uh, podcast. I always forget that name. Um, so last week we spoke to Janet Fields and we talked about property management, got some
And
tips and
ghosts.
whatnot.
And how
And
she had
ghosts. Yeah, that's right.
haunted properties.
That kind of creeped me out for a little while after. Um, this week, and it's interesting to see some of the social media reactions we got on this topic. But this week we're going to discuss buying real estate with credit cards. It's possible. Brian did it, and
I did.
and a little bit about how to get creative with credit cards because we often look at the credit cards as terrible, but there are good things if they're used correctly. So with that, Brian, why don't you discuss? Oh, and then we have a webinar coming tomorrow that's going to be amazing. And we'll get into that a little bit later, Brian. I'll talk about that. But go ahead, Brian. Let's
Right.
talk about, the differences between, credit lines and HELOCs. That was one of the questions I saw come up.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, we did last month's webinar all about creative financing, and we're taking that a step further, or at least diving deeper into one of these angles tomorrow in this month's webinar about how to use unsecured business credit cards and credit lines to invest in real estate. So, and we're bringing in a partner to talk to you about how that works and some of the best practices. But so today we're going an overview of that, and we'll talk about some of the different kinds of credit lines. So you have HELOCs, which a lot of people are familiar with. Those are home equity lines of credit. They are secured against a piece of property, whether that is your home, which is the traditional way of doing HELOCs, or whether it's a rental property. A lot of people don't realize that you can open HELOCs against rental properties and investment properties. You also have unsecured business lines of credit. Those are not attached to a property. They're not secured with a lien against a property. But they work just like HELOCs. Interest rate tends to be a little higher because they are unsecured, right? And all credit is priced based on risk. And then you also have business credit cards, which are also unsecured. They're not secure with a lien against real property. And you can use all three of these types of rotating credit or revolving credit as a real estate investor. You can use them to put towards a down payment on a property. You can use them towards renovation costs for a property. You can use them to buy properties outright if you're buying properties that are cheap enough, or if you have enough in credit lines.
Right.
So like Deni said, I did buy a property with a credit card once, or with a couple credit cards. It was a very cheap property, and it was an experiment. It was a learning experience, but it worked. It was a combination of putting the material costs directly on the credit card. So in doing that, I did not have any cash advance fees, right? There were no upfront fees associated with that. I could just swipe the card to put the material costs for the renovation on there. For the money to actually buy the property, I did take a cash advance, which varies by card, usually in the 3 to 5% range. Although there are services out there, and this is something we'll get into more tomorrow in the webinar, but there are services out there that will actually send money to the recipient of your choice, including title companies, and they charge a fee that is less than credit card cash advance fees. You're normally looking at like 2.5%, maybe 2.75%, less than that 3, 4, 5% that you're going to pay to the credit card company in cash advance fees. And often those fees, like that 2.5 or 2.75% fee that you pay for this, is less than you would pay in points and junk fees to a mortgage lender. Most mortgage lenders for rental properties, they charge at least 2 points, usually more like 3 or 4.
Right.
And then they hit you with all the junk fees, which are those flat fees that they just make up to make more money on loans, right? Things
It's
like
interesting. People, you don't realize, you think, oh, credit cards, no, look at all those fees, but you're paying fees anyway. So,
right. So, flat fees include like administrative fee and processing fee and, doc stamp fee and, document preparation fee and, all kinds of just junk. I mean, they're just making them up to charge you more money on the loans. Now, interest rates are going to be higher for unsecured business credit cards, credit lines. They're going to be higher than you would pay to a mortgage. So it usually only makes sense to do this for either low cost properties that you can pay off the card really quickly.
Right.
Um, or if you have some exit strategy in mind, like flipping or like the Burr method, where you're only going to be holding the property with this initial financing for a few months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, while you do the renovations. But you don't want to be holding this debt long term, obviously, right? With unsecured business credit lines, credit cards, or credit lines, because you're talking about paying anywhere from 8 to like 26% in interest, which is fine for a few months. It's not going to kill you for a few months, but if that's measured in years, then you're in trouble. So, um,
Absolutely.
yeah, for short-term financing, like for flips or the Burr method, where you buy a fixer-upper and then refinance it to keep as a long-term rental. Yeah, for those, it's much more about the fees that you pay than about the interest rate, since you're only holding the financing for a few months.
So anybody here, if you've ever done anything like this, use credit cards, let us know in the comments. And how did it work out? Is this something you would even consider? Just curious to see what everybody's reactions to this are. And Brian, tell us, let's talk about the webinar, because I think it's really exciting and it's a new concept. So what's happening with that tomorrow?
Well, so we are partnering with a company called Fund and Grow, or I say partnering. We have been partnered with a company called Fund and Grow for a few years now. And we try to do a webinar with them once a year because it's such a novel service that they offer. What they do is they help you open unsecured business credit lines and credit cards as a real estate investor. So they are familiar. They have relationships with all of the main business credit card issuers and credit line issuers. They negotiate on your behalf for higher credit limits, and they do this in 3 rounds of fundraising over the course of a year. I say fundraising, meaning they go out and they open these new lines of credit for you or new credit cards for you. And in between each round of fundraising, they scrub your credit to remove inquiries from your credit report, and they help you look for errors in your credit report and clean up your credit report.
So you'll raise your credit score along with other benefits.
Yeah, that's part of the service that they offer, and they keep tabs on all of the 0% APR introductory financing offers. So they'll open the accounts for you with the best of those offers at any given moment. So you can get your first 6, 12, 18 months of credit for free, no interest. And if you are carrying other debts that you want to move over to that card, you can do a balance transfer to transfer. Let's say you have a $5,000 existing credit card balance that you're paying 20% interest on. You can move that over to one of these new cards for that introductory 0% period while you pay it off and knock it out. So yeah, no, they're a great company. And so the webinar tomorrow, they're going to walk you through exactly how to use these unsecured business credit lines and credit cards as a real estate investor. And one of the things, Deni, that we didn't talk about yet, but that we should, is how credit card rewards can also offset the cost to the fee, the upfront fee to use to put real estate on a credit card, because often you can get 1.5 to 2.5%, sometimes even more,
Yeah,
in reward points.
which is crazy. I mean, that's I mean, I'm gonna be honest here. I'm real transparent. Brian was just showing me about this, and my husband and I have started to implement it in some areas of our lives. And you don't realize that if done properly, it's quite a good benefit for travel and
Yeah, I
anything
mean,
else.
you can score free flights all over the world with your credit card points, and depending on how you spend those points, you can earn more than that classic 1.5 2% that is advertised. I mean, sometimes you can earn as much as 6 cents on the dollar for those credit card rewards, or even more if you use the rewards wisely, such as
Mm.
transferring the points directly to an airline. Um, and booking that flight through the airline points. So you can get creative with that, and that can more than offset the costs, that 2.5 or 2.75% costs that companies charge to move money from your credit card to real estate, or
Right.
to the equivalent of a cash advance, and avoid that cash advance fee that credit cards charge if you go through them. So
Tim Dooley commented that he's looking forward to the webinar. We're looking forward to seeing you, Tim.
absolutely, as always, Tim, it's always a
Yeah.
pleasure. Tim is a regular if you guys aren't familiar with Tim.
And we're very appreciative to have him.
Yeah, so credit cards can be a super useful tool as a real estate investor. You just have to be careful not to carry a balance with them for long term, because as you know, if you've ever read any personal finance articles about credit cards, you know that they're super high interest if you carry a balance, and that's how you can dig yourself into a hole. And we had I had a guy email me earlier today talking about how he's intrigued by the idea of using credit cards to pay for real estate, but he expressed concern about over leverage, and that is a valid concern when you're talking about putting the down payment also on credit, right? Like borrowing the down payment in addition to the full mortgage. In some ways the down payment protects you, protects you from negative cash flow, from getting upside down on your mortgage. So by the way, Deni just put a couple links in
For some reason,
the
they doubled, so pardon me for that.
so we put some links here in the comments. For one, the first link is for the 2 p.m. Eastern webinar tomorrow. We're also doing an encore webinar at 8 p.m. So there's a separate link for the 8 p.m. Eastern webinar as well. So just sign up for whichever one you can make. And yeah, Deni, any other thoughts about using credit cards or business credit lines for real estate investing?
Well, I think even if you don't use it to buy the real estate, you certainly can use it. And I think you went over this a little bit earlier, but all the supplies, appliances. I mean, sometimes certain credit card companies will give extra points if you go to certain stores like Lowe's or
Right, like
whatnot.
double
So you
rewards. Yeah.
right. So keep an eye on stuff like that. And if I mean, if you're diligent at this, you'd be surprised. I was checking into it, and it's like you'd be surprised at what you can get out of this.
Yeah, and just to double down on that for a second. So using your credit cards to pay for materials when you're renovating a property. So not only do you not pay any kind of cash advance fee upfront for that, you get the reward points, right? And that is something that I've used before to negotiate with contractors, where contractors love to pad their material expenses, right, when they give you a quote. So one of the things that I like to do when I'm negotiating with contractors for a job is I'll say, okay, well, give me a quote for labor only, just for labor. And that way, and tell them, I will put the materials, I'll pay for the materials myself. Just give me a quote for the labor, and that way they can't pad those material numbers. I mean, shiesty contractors can always do things like putting things in the cart that they are planning to use on other jobs. It's not foolproof, but if you're working with reasonably honest contractors, it's just one more way to keep some clarity with your renovation expenses, and you get the reward points.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
all right, Deni, any other thoughts that you want to add before we wrap up today, talking about credit cards, credit lines for real estate investing?
No, I think that you covered it all. I think that you'll learn more on the webinar. And yeah.
Yeah, so join us tomorrow. Fund and Grow is going to show you how to open between $50,000 and $250,000 in unsecured business credit as a real estate investor. We'll see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern or 8 p.m. Eastern, depending what's best for you.
Absolutely. See you next week, guys, and have fun at that webinar. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye now.